Welcome back to The Heat. Media reports say Chinese Vice Premier Liu He is expected to visit Washington at the end of the month to continue talks in the U.S.-China trade dispute. A U.S. delegation met with Chinese officials in Beijing this week for 3 days of mid-level talks. The delegation returned to Washington with a commitment from China to buy more U.S. agricultural goods, energy and manufactured products. Beijing said the meetings laid the foundation for a trade resolution. Well, let's get back to our panel. And Qinduo, what do you know about the meeting that took place in Beijing?
Well, I think, of course, there's no specific agreement reached so far, but obviously the discussion, which has been extended to the third day, has touched upon many of the substantial issues. For example, the protection of IPR and also the so-called technology transfer issues, of course, very much concerned the U.S. side. Those issues are tough issues and very difficult to reach a specific deal. I think the easier part, of course, we have heard about that, like China is ready to purchase more products from the United States, agricultural products and other energy products, etc. But these, the other issues are more, let's say, tricky. For example, protection of intellectual property rights. The thing is that if you look at the Chinese record, there is clear progress over the past years. But China is a big country with 1.4 billion people. For the Chinese side itself, there is a strong incentive to have register a strong record in protecting intellectual property rights, because its own people, its own company now are innovating rapidly. They need protection. But the things like whether the legal efforts, legislative efforts, and government efforts, are they enough to protect the rights in a proper way? Not to mention, of course, the rights from other countries, including the U.S. But so I think on the Chinese side, it is serious to protect those rights. It's really about, I think people should understand that, they will improve year by year, but you cannot reach a record, a strong record, say, overnight. I think if you look at all the sides, they are in line with the Chinese reform and opening up for the next step. So I'm confident some kind of deal will be reached between the two sides.
Merrill, the Chinese, we understand, have given the United States assurances that they will start buying more U.S. goods, including agricultural produce. But the United States says any deal must include, and I'm quoting here, ongoing verification and effective enforcement. What does that mean?
Well, they're talking about the technology transfer, intellectual property protections, and they have not gotten to the source on that. How are they going to do it, and what does it mean? Because China has tried to move forward on the intellectual property protections area, but that's going to take something, I think, at the higher level of discussions, and I think that's why the next meeting may be more substantive in trying to address those real problems. But all you really need to know about this is that we saw a report earlier this week that Donald Trump said he wants to get an agreement with China because he thinks it's affecting the stock market, and he sees the stock market as a proxy on how well he's doing. The stock market's been tanking the last few months in part because of the China trade concern. So if Donald Trump is on board with he needs to get the stock market up, we will probably get an agreement sometime soon.
So in a sense, Merrill, that gives the Chinese leverage, doesn't it?
Oh, I think it does. If Donald Trump feels like he is being hammered with a low stock, he loves to be able to go out and say, the stock market's doing great, which shows how well I'm doing leading this country. And it's been reacting. He tried a few months ago to blame it all on the Federal Reserve Bank. There was some truth to that, but most people didn't really believe it.
Right. Brian, we've been hearing some statements come out of this meeting, very carefully worded statements. Things like there is now some basis for optimism. Do you think this is going to be resolved soon?
I agree with the other guests. I mean, Donald Trump his hand is not full of aces right now. Yeah. The stock market has gone way down. The stock market, there's a lot of jitters. It's not just the trade war, but the trade war is contributing to it. Right. That puts political pressure on the Trump administration. A lot of businesses, I would say most businesses that do international business want a trade deal. That includes a big part of Donald Trump's constituency. But at the same time, you have these kind of contradictory phenomena. At the moment that Xi Jinping was meeting with Donald Trump in Buenos Aires, the Huawei chief financial officer was arrested in Vancouver while changing planes. Now we have the arrest this week of a Huawei executive, a sales executive in Poland. This seems like a coordinated effort by some parts of the American government, along with its, quote, allies, to punish Chinese companies in a way that would be considered completely unacceptable if the shoe was on the other foot, if China started doing the same thing. Yeah. So I think Donald Trump does want the deal, and that means the deal might happen, and there's a good reason to have cautious optimism, but there's this countervailing headwinds that's deep within the U.S. government, and it's operational right now.
It's called leverage.
Yeah. Myung-koo Kang, we are talking about the world's two biggest economies here.
Right.
Of course, China is a major trading partner with more than 130 countries, including South Korea.
Right.
It is South Korea's biggest trading partner. What kind of impact does this kind of dispute have on South Korea?
It's huge, tremendous. I mean, right now, out of total South Korean trade, I mean, China portion is more than 30%. So it's a big deal. So ongoing trade war and conflict between the two countries is a tremendous negative impact towards South Korea. So from the South Korean government or people's point of view, resolving the ongoing trade conflict in the two countries is very, very essential. I mean, in terms of trade relationship, China is the number one, most important partner. But at the same time, in terms of cross-border capital or financial aspect, United States is number one, most important country to South Korea. So South Korea is sandwiched in between. So from the Korean people, South Korean people's point of view, any kind of peaceful resolution of the ongoing trade conflict is welcome. Yeah.
Qinduo, one of the big grievances or complaints that we've heard from the U.S. side is that it's very difficult for U.S. companies to open up their business in China, to do business with China. Well, we just heard news that Tesla is building a $5 billion plant outside Shanghai. So what kind of a signal does that send?
Well, I think, of course, people follow the development of the Chinese side, the reform and opening up, all the new reforms, especially since last year. You can see some of them are very substantial. For example, in the sectors, the four sectors, including the auto, the financial sector, it is opening up. There's no limit on what percentage foreign investor can have in the joint venture. They can have their solely foreign-owned companies in China, in the auto sector, financial sector, and the other two sectors. So Tesla is such a case in point. I think this is a strong signal to be received by the international community. Yes, it's the time for them to invest in China and continue to invest in China. Now they can do it with a freer hand, let's say. So I think this is in line with the Chinese long-term national policy that is deepening reform and further opening up this country to the international community. This is absolutely in the Chinese interests. There is a consensus basically within China that is we need to continue to open the country further. Of course, there are a lot of still barriers that we need to remove to make it easier for investors from other countries to do investment in China. At the same time, I think, of course, China and the U.S., the negotiations are touching upon some of the issues. I think the two sides, so based on that judgment, U.S. demands basically is more or less similar to what China is going to do.
Merrill, looking at this big issue of market access for the United States, when we look at these actions that China has taken, like this Tesla factory, the plant that we're talking about, does that go quite a long way to meeting some of those U.S. demands?
Oh, I don't really think so. Elon Musk, who runs Tesla, is a contrarian and a disruptor. He's always doing things different than everybody else. On the other hand, the Chamber of Commerce and the businesses in the U.S. are concerned that this China trade issue is going to go badly, and that they're already beginning to look at other ways, other markets, ways to shift production in other places. So what I'm hoping is we get a solution to this, because these things are always lagging indicators. I mean, even if you get a solution right this month, it takes a while for businesses to step back what they were doing. Right. So it could create problems if he doesn't address this issue soon.
Okay, Brian, we're getting reports, media reports, that the Chinese Vice Premier Liu He is expected to visit Washington at the end of the month. What can we read into that? This would be a pretty high-level visit. Yeah,
I mean, that's President Xi's primary economic advisor. It shows the great degree of seriousness that the Chinese government is taking the trade talks. clearly it's a demonstration on the part of the Chinese government in perhaps the clearest possible way that these mid-level talks need to be followed with senior talks, and that these senior talks can lead to a resolution. Again, both sides actually need this. If some people in the Trump administration would like to see China go down, down, down economically, well, how is that good for U.S. business or U.S. jobs, since the world economy is such an integrated, complex entity? If China goes down, guess what? The U.S. will go down, and wiser heads, those who are not driven by right-wing ideological anti-China positions, know this to be true. So I think it's a serious effort. I think it's trying to meet the Trump administration, not halfway, but even a little bit more than halfway.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.